like, as a Christian, I long for everybody to come into a greater understanding of truth as I understand it, which is...
Why is that sentence is so loaded? Why is it truth as you understand it?
Because I believe that the truth I have is true.
Welcome to Cross-Examined, a podcast about confronting difference in good faith. I'm Evan Mandery, and in each episode, my co-host, John Inazu, and I come at a divisive question from opposing viewpoints and work to understand each other more fully without giving up on the conversation. In episode 3, we turn to parenting, asking how far a parent's love can go and the ways becoming a parent can change you, sometimes selfishly, sometimes selflessly. One thing we haven't both revealed, we're both parents. Not that this is a really huge reveal, but so we both have 3 kids. I'm married approximately 17 years. And you?
22 years.
Okay. And so I tried to think what's the most difficult, personal, uncomfortable question I could ask. And this is definitely one I've thought about a lot, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on it. Is having children a selfish or a selfless act?
I think having children is a selfless act that can quickly make you a selfish person, or at least reveal the depth of your selfishness that you did not previously know. So it's selfless in this way. It takes a ton of sacrifice. It constrains you in ways that you maybe didn't anticipate. And it also brings into the world a vulnerable human being who will be exposed to certainly some wonderful things, but also a lot of suffering and pain. And to do that with self-awareness, I think requires a kind of selflessness. I mean, we'll have to talk about greater purpose as well at some point. But so I think it's at root selfless, but I'm sure, as you will agree, there's nothing in the world that makes you more aware of your own selfishness and self-centeredness than having kids and the imposition that you can feel from them. Or maybe you won't agree with that. Maybe
this is the great thing about this. My answer is the exact opposite of your answer. So, and I mean, this is the point of this, and it's so interesting. I mean, I'm not like wed to my answer, and I'm not like, bothered by your answer, but I've always thought having children is selfish. My wife had 2 kids when we got married, so I inherited 2 kids who I think of as my own kids. And then we have 1 child together. But we were in our 40s at that point where we had our daughter, Maddie, who is, in addition to my wife, the love of my life, but really, really like Maddie a lot. And, we had to put a lot of thought into it. Obviously, it's somewhat difficult trying to get pregnant when you're in your 40s. But, I thought a lot about how many millions of needy existing babies there were in the world, and that, we had the resources. We thought we had the resources to give a home to 1 more of those. And so I thought it was selfish not to make that choice. Now, once we had the kid and have the kids, I think it's mostly selfless. I mean, my wife and I, am sure, would lay down our lives without a second thought for any of the kids. We've definitely prioritized their needs over our own. Although we'd get so much joy out of them, I don't feel like that's a major sacrifice. But I've had the opposite feeling. I actually think being a parent made me a better, less selfish person. But I thought the initial act was very, very self-absorbed.
That's interesting. I think if you add questions of adoption or foster care or other possibilities that might be in lieu of trying to get pregnant as a couple, I think there's certainly a case to be made for selfishness. I also think, as a Christian, there's a biblical command, be fruitful and multiply, and that's part of the mix. So I think about, and I sometimes talk to people within the context of Christian marriage, is it okay to get married and then not either have kids or adopt or foster or something like that? And I think there are probably unique circumstances where that might be the case, but to me, the thumb on the scale would be if you're going to enter into marriage, then part of the purpose of marriage is to welcome children into your home, whether natural children by birth or fostering or adoption. And then I'll say another thing about my own selfishness in this. I often think, wouldn't it be great if we have the resources, and should we adopt a child now at this point in life, or should we do more? And part of the reason we don't is is because I think I'm selfish. I think, well, that would really be hard, and life feels full as it is. And I don't know if that's a great answer to saying no to a kid who needs a home, but it's where I've so far answered the question. The selfishness of having kids, particularly in Western American Christianity, can often recenter the focus of your efforts on the individual nuclear family as opposed to who you are called to be in community with a larger body of believers. So the phrase focus on the family, which has become part of the lore since the 80s in this country. And I think there are lots of reasons why focusing on the family is a good thing. I like the family, but when it becomes to the detriment of, or instead of focusing on a broader community, particularly and including your own church community, that includes people who are not in families, or maybe are, the Bible has a whole lot to say about caring for widows and orphans. And so what does that look like if you are predominantly focused on the success of your own kids or the safety of your own kids? If you come into a community, religious or otherwise, and say, I'm here, but the condition upon being here is that we maximize my own family's interests, and I don't really care as much about the other people around me. I could say I care, but at the end of the day, we're going to prioritize our vacations and our sports clubs and our rhythms and our comfort over the rest of the people. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is, and I think, again, American culture is uniquely perverse here, but we can focus on, the family and the kids to the neglect of older aging relatives who for most of human history and most of the world today are still part of the family unit. And I think we have a tendency in this country to say there's a great retirement community or a place where you can go, but we don't age well as family units in a way that we used to. So in those ways, I think the kid piece can be selfish. And at some point, what do they call that? The squeezed generation that is both caring for aging parents and caring for kids at the same time. That becomes a lot to manage, and often the focus on the kids can come at the neglect of aging parents, and I think that's a reality to deal with when you think about the selfishness of parenting.
Okay, I don't get the be fruitful and multiply. So, I understand it. I'm aware of it. I understand what the words mean. I remember Justice Scalia once saying, my wife and we play Vatican roulette, and Justice Scalia, I think, had 8 children. Am I right about that?
It seems ballpark.
Ballpark, right? Yeah. He had at least a starting basketball team with reasonable number of reserves. And so obviously I have no religious motivation or imperative to have children. And it was a very complicated decision. And I would say more or less the way I looked at it was, well, I could give somebody, a disembodied soul, an opportunity to have this experience, and it's a mixed bag. On balance, I get more joy in life out of suffering, but I've definitely experienced a share of both. And I'll say, my child, I named her Evan Mandery the fourth. Oh, that didn't get enough of a laugh.
Sorry.
No, it's actually Maddie. And, she's 16. And, my answer today is even different than it was when I had her. I look at the path of the world and I'm worried. I don't necessarily want to bring somebody, I wouldn't want to bring somebody into a life where I thought they were likely to suffer more than they were to get pleasure out of it. So that's kind of the basic way I looked at it.
Yeah, that's interesting because in an earlier episode, you were even, let me say, more bleak about
Oh, there I
the
can get
future.
bleaker. Yeah.
So, would you make the same decision in 2025 that you made 16, 17 years ago?
I think no. I think no. So I would adopt. And and I think everybody who's a parent understands, if you're not a negligent parent, that it consumes your life in a way that I actually think is very, on balance, quite good for you. So you're not thinking only about your interests, but it also takes an enormous amount of time and energy. And, there'd be a point where I think that would be difficult. Yeah, I'd adopt adopt a child in need now.
You still could.
Well, I'm married, so I think that's a joint decision. And
It is a joint decision.
yeah,
Yes, we can agree on that.
First of all, we still have a kid in high school, and that takes up a lot of time. And I go to everything. Like I've coached. This will be actually the first basketball season I haven't coached my daughter since she was 6. And I've basically gone to every game, every concert that she and our son, and every performance our older daughter had. So it takes a ton of time. But yeah, if I were on my own, I would.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but it's interesting. The more kids you have, the fewer events you can go to, right? The less
right,
optimal you can be, because we just last week we had a bunch of kids with different activities at the same time, and it was there was no good answer. We had to split forces, and it was suboptimal, but that's part of the challenge. And then and even relationally, your time is split more with the more people you have in your life.
So can I just probe out of curiosity, so what is the extension of the Christian position on be fruitful and multiply? So there's some theoretical carrying capacity for the planet, right? Even if you're a Malthusian or not, right? There's some level at which resources start to become scarce. But would it then, so say we're at a population of 25 billion and the planet's really crowded and straining, but would the interpretation of the be fruitful imperative be, well, look, 25 billion in one is going to increase competition for resources a little bit more, but there's space and it'll still be better than not being alive. What's the logical extension of the be fruitful and multiply position?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think one important piece for me about understanding the Bible is that it's not like you just read the words and assume the full answer is just there in the text itself. I don't believe that 6-day creation was 6 24-hour periods, for example, that happened 6,000 years ago. And so there's interpretation and application that has to happen. So I don't know how to answer that question in a world with 25 billion people. I would say in a world today, especially in the West, which has amassed this massive power and wealth, that there's, and with declining birth rates generally, there's probably even more of a responsibility to say, have children and be sacrificial in how you raise them. Now, your adoption question is an important one. And that's complicated too, because when you get into things like cross-racial adoption, which happens in a lot of Christian families and is encouraged by different ministries, that has its own set of challenges and complications that are not always, I think, well executed, and sometimes they are. I can't really speak to the experience of it, but the impulse or the initiative to just go do something or go adopt, I think in reality is far more complicated.
How did you, as a family, how did you and your wife, Caroline, how did you reach your own sense of what the right number for you was?
Well, so we did premarital counseling.
Oh, really?
We actually did 3 different sets of it. We were in that much, I guess, need of advice. So before we got married, as we got engaged, we met with other wiser, more mature Christians who'd been at the marriage thing for a long time, and they had their own challenges and shortcomings, but they were amazing people who poured into our lives and gave us lots of advice and helped us think through and reflect on these questions. And so one of the answers was, how many kids do you think you would feel called to have or want to have? And I think at the time my answer might have been 2 or 3, and Caroline's was maybe 3 or 4 or 4. I don't know. Somehow we settled on, or the number we came to was 3, which is what we have. But I don't know. I mean, I sometimes wonder, I don't know if there's a right number. That's just where we ended up. Okay, Evan, before we move on, talk to me more about if all we are is just a bunch of molecules.
I feel like that somehow is disparaging to molecules, like you're molecularist. I like molecules.
Okay, with no offense meant to molecules.
Right.
If that's all we are, and if you are, it just feels odd to say at some point in life, Evan, felt like on balance there was marginally more joy than suffering, and so for that reason I will be part of bringing more molecules into the world to experience marginally more joy than suffering.
Yeah, you're really in my head.
So say more.
I mean, like, no, that's kind of what it was like. It was like, oh yeah, we'll reassemble or assemble this new molecule.
But then,
it wasn't anything.
But what's really interesting to me is you started our conversation by describing how, I mean, it was just evident in how you were even talking about Maddie, right?
I love her.
You love her. You care so deeply for her. Is that just ultimately selfishness?
She's like an accumulation of some of my favorite molecules. I mean, everybody's got a favorite molecule, right?
But is that
like ammonia, NH3? Everybody likes NH3.
I'm not going to name my kids a molecule, but here, let me press on this a little more, because Maddie's existence in the world takes up resources of this world.
I mean, it's absolutely, and it's incredibly selfish. She brings me so much joy. Like, she gives me purpose. You could say I'm smiling now. Like, I'm just thinking about her and I'm smiling, and like, I have no right to that. But
how would you define joy?
How do I find joy? She shares this. We have very, very deeply entwined senses of humor. So, we find the same things funny. That brings me joy. We actually like the same music. Like, it's kind of incredible. She's 16 and our musical tastes overlap by like 90%. So I get joy in that. She's a reader. We're actually reading the same book right now. Brings me incredible joy. Simultaneously, she's her own person. But it so happens, actually, her friends, you see that I really like kids, and I'm like not judgmental, so I generally get along really well with young people, and I actually think most of her friends are kind of my friends. Like, they share a lot of stuff with me, so I'm blessed. It's great. Oh yeah, you flagged me on this. So I was thinking, like, why do I invoke God so much? It's because I'm so culturally Jewish. Like, Jews are always invoking God. Like, it's just more of a superego thing than.
Can you try again to define joy instead of give examples of it?
I mean, it's just a physical experience. Like, I mean, we're all smiling right now, so that's joyful. And maybe I'm not for a moment worrying about, whether we're going to invade Venezuela or whether the rule of law is going to survive. And I was just thinking about my kid, and I smiled. And I got you guys to laugh with a joke. That made me happy. That's it. I don't have anything more profound to say than that.
No, that's good.
I feel like it must seem sad to you sitting where you're sitting for me to live as I live.
Sad is not how I would describe it. I think, my first instinctive response is to say you're actually underselling and under-describing what you are experiencing. And maybe you have to force yourself to do that because your starting premise is molecules. But I think you're actually displaying a kind of human flourishing and depth of connectedness that at least calls into question the molecule's premise. So there's nothing about that makes me sad. It actually just makes me curious and hopeful.
I'm glad you and Allison are hopeful. It'll bring up the room average. Molecules vibrate sometimes. Like, I think it's the same thing. It must be pleasant for the molecules to experience whatever synchronicity or vibration they're experiencing. But it's just still kind of a physical thing. So anyway, okay, so we should probe this. I haven't asked this, but I presume this. You've raised your children with faith, right?
Yeah, I mean, say more about what you mean by that descriptive.
In the church, like, well, you just say what it is. Were they allowed to pick for themselves? Like, how was religion introduced to them? Were all religions introduced to them? Were you agnostic as to which one?
Yeah, no, definitely not agnostic. No, I would absolutely hope that they end up embracing the Christian faith. That'd be a great joy to me. Maybe a different definition of the word joy, but no, I think that is sort of one implication of the hope that I have in my faith, is that they would also come to share that faith. And so, yes, we sent them to a Christian school when they were younger. We go to church as a family, and we don't usually say, well, we don't ever say, like, if you feel like it, come with us. We say we're going to church as a family.
It's expected that they go.
It's expected that they go. Now, I don't think beyond that we're super hands-on about it, and especially, as my oldest daughter is now a freshman in college, and you realize, I think, pretty quickly that you don't have a whole lot of control about what they think or where they go. And I actually have seen enough cases of a heavy-handed imposition of faith that can backfire with kids. And so my approach is, and I think Caroline and I both as parents, our approach has been, hold it pretty loosely, know that we're all works in progress, and trust that God is in control of this, and try to model the things that we value and care about as much in what we do as what we say, if we can. I mean, we're obviously screwing it up all the time, but hopefully modeling it well. And then, hope that there's a plausibility structure out there for them to learn and seek and embrace it on their own.
Well, I'll just say, you don't seem like you're screwing it up very much. I've now been fortunate to meet two of your kids, and they're extremely nice people.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
But, that we all, I think I've said this in an earlier episode, but I actually do believe, like, every generation is just going to impose its flaws on the next one and require a lot of counseling to correct it. And that's okay. Like, we're just not going to get it right completely. I do think that prioritizing relationship and love and trust and forgiveness and humility are really important things in parenting, and so there are good and bad ways to do that.
By the way, we completely agree on that, right? I just don't get there from a religious perspective. Have you thought, how would you feel, perhaps this is an utterly implausible hypothetical, if one of your children married somebody outside the faith, they wanted to convert, maybe they married a Jew and wanted to convert to Judaism? I don't know why that's so funny. Anyway, have you ever inhabited that space?
Oh, I mean, sure, because, in our pluralistic society, people meet lots of people, and,
right.
and there are lots of interfaith contexts. And, I think asking that question prospectively, where I have no idea where my kids are going to end up, I mean, I think the first thing I would want to say is, I'm going to love my kids where they end up, and
Good.
I'm going to pursue them relationally.
Glad to hear you say that.
I also, as a Christian, I long for everybody to come into a greater understanding of truth as I understand it, which is...
Why is that sentence is so loaded? As a Christian, I understand for people to, what was the verb? Reach a greater understanding of truth. And I'm like, yeah. And then you went, as I understand it. And I'm like, why? Why is it truth as you understand it?
Because I believe that the truth I have is true, right? It's not just my truth. I think it's true objectively for the entire world. And why, if I actually believe that, why wouldn't I want everybody else to come to that same conclusion?
I think if that's your premise, I agree that that's a conclusion. So I was going to ask about just raising kids within a faith community. It seems from the outside very nice. Like, you probably get a built-in network of friends that you kind of have some commonality with, maybe a group of people that you could actually trust, that you would start from a position that they could help you out, you would help them. So that seems very, very nice. And my wife and I, we've talked about going to different types of places. It would have to be very tolerant, minimally dogmatic, and very embracing of all kinds of people. Like, I'm not going to go somewhere if they're not welcoming to people because of their gender or sexual orientation. But it would be disingenuous. I can't do it. Like, I'd go to church with you. I'd be happy to sit there. I'm sure I would find the experience interesting, but I couldn't actually make the leap of faith because I don't believe. It would be like trying to jump off a rooftop or something like that. I'd just be like, you sit there, trust me, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, I can't do it. Like, maybe from your standpoint, I'm being held back by something.
Well, I don't know if you're being held back. I think you're making choices and decisions to embrace certain commitments and practices that come at the expense of others that then in turn form who you are and how you live in the world. And there's no way around that. Just briefly on whether church provides a network of friends and community. I don't know. Maybe sometimes it's also really hard because you're with people you don't like. And,
is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a mixed bag. And you can be with people who don't, who aren't necessarily friends, who don't click with you. But this is kind of back to what I was saying earlier about the focus on the nuclear family to the neglect of the broader family of the church is easier to do because you can start to think of your family as your people. But sometimes you actually have to be with people who you don't want to be around or you don't want to spend time with. And, church can be extremely disappointing and it can be extremely dysfunctional and hurtful. And
hurtful?
Sure.
In what way?
Because churches are made of people and people disappoint. So sometimes you have breaches of trust and you have incompetent leadership. You can have narcissistic leadership. You can have pathologies when it comes to mistreating people. I mean, we could go on and on. The church has every institutional problem that other institutions have. And, you can see that in the most headlines today as well. So it's not like it's this utopian destination where everything's happy and everyone is friends, but it's something that you're called to do as a Christian, sometimes sacrificially and sometimes suboptimally.
Okay, so back to the question you asked me about Maddie. So if she joined an organized religion, a lot of the specifics would matter to me. What was her motivation, and what does it look like, and what does it believe? Okay, this is highly implausible. But say Maddie joined a church and she said, gay people aren't welcome, and we're going to, or actually we're transphobic, whatever, we're going to actively work against these communities. I'd be pretty turned off by that. But if she showed up in, I don't know, a Quaker community or something like that, and she sat quietly reflecting on things, and I don't know, every Quaker I've met has been a pretty decent person, like, all right, that'd be fine. So it'd be the substance of the beliefs that would matter. But I'd be applying my reason to analyzing those beliefs. I mean, I don't know if I could sit. I hope we do this for a long time. And we're going to, obviously, we don't see eye to eye about some things. But like, if you sat here and I was like, oh, like you were super transphobic or homophobic or something like that, that would be hard. Like, that would be hard. But it's kind of because your grounding, I don't share or understand, but it gets you to a place that is reasonably comfortable for me. So I'm happy to have the conversations. It would be the same thing with Maddie.
But it's interesting because most of what you said had very little to do with reason and a whole lot to do with normative premises and beliefs, which is fine. I mean, I think that's how we live in the world. But to say that you got there through reason seems contrary to how you actually live in the world. I mean, the preference to be hospitable to people, that's not a preference rooted in reason. It's an intuition and a norm and an ethic.
Right. I mean, have you ever read Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind?
Yes. I've taught that book.
Okay, so I've taught it too. And so, his basic premise is that we just have kind of gut intuitions about things, and then we articulate rationalizations for these positions that we intuitively feel. So yeah, I think that's true, and I can own that. But I will say, I mean, I've taught ethics for a very long time, and so I've read a lot, and I get to places where my reason confirms my intuition from lots of different standpoints, and then I feel sort of more comfortable acting on that.
The one thing I would add there, though, is it's not just your intuition that finally catches up to reason, but it's how you are shaped by your experiences in life and the people and communities and ideas that you encounter that form you, that then affect your sense of what reason is and connect to intuition. So I think it'd be, in some ways, what I'm pushing back against here is the intuition or the implication that reason somehow exists out there and you just sort of find it in its pure form, as opposed to
Kant. Like Kant.
Well, Kant, or lots of other ways
Sure.
to get there too, but that as opposed to reason, your lived encounter with reason is a function of and conditioned by your experiences and practices in the world.
Fair enough. Sure. I have my beliefs about what's right and wrong and how I want to live my life, however I've come to them. So, if she found a church and it kind of largely overlapped with that, I'd be interested in that, but it wouldn't be a practical problem. But if she dedicated her life to fighting against gay marriage,
or she converted to Islam and assumed a traditional gender role within the Islamic faith.
right? I would feel bad about that, but you would too, right?
Yeah, but this is the question for you. If she converted to Orthodox Judaism.
Oh, good one. Yeah, I'd be really, really unhappy with that. I'd be really unhappy if she entered into a relationship that required her subjugation.
As you understand subjugation.
I'm just going to say, there's an implied as I understand it in every sentence that I say.
Yeah, but but this is the point. Do you know this book by
Probably
this old
not.
book, Saba Mahmood? No, it's she's a super interesting an anthropologist, feminist anthropologist who did an anthropological study of Islam and the veil, and kind of came in with sort of a Rawlsian premise about Western gender equality, and came out of the study thinking, I don't know, maybe there's a way in which there's a self-understanding that is not just, the full story is not in the end just subjugation as I understand it, that there might actually be, from the internal perspective, a sense of women and women's empowerment within even conservative Islam that sees things differently. Is that possible?
That her subjective experience of subjugation would be not subjugation, that she would be like, oh, I like this. Sure. I mean, look, my answer is going to be for the kid. I really can't imagine any circumstance in which I wouldn't love her. Pretty much every scenario, I'm going to love the kid. True for you too, right?
For sure.
So we're deeply bonded by our love for our children, and so I feel like we should all be in the same tent.
We should be in the metaphorical church of heaven where we're listening to jazz and it's without membership requirements.
There are no dues. There's just I'm a minister, so I've performed several weddings. It cost me $15. I think I'm an ordained minister of, I don't know, the Church of Universal Life, and I think its premises are exactly what I said to you. All life is worthy of respect. All people are welcome in the church. That's it. But there's no dogma. There's no transubstantiation.
I know
You like transubstantiation.
Well, of a sort, but I think I'm actually my lawyer hat is on now, and I'm just thinking about the limits of ordination for purposes of taxes and other things. But that's a different conversation.
Well, in my mind, your lawyer hat kind of looks like what do we call the hat that the Pope wears?
I don't know, the Pope hat.
The Pope hat, yeah. I think it would be funny if your lawyer hat looked like the Pope hat. Well, I appreciate both of you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to the next one.
Yes, thanks.
Cross-Examined is hosted by Evan Mandery and John Inazu. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Olivia Schroeder. Today's episode was produced by Perry Wilson and Allison Smith. Music by Nathan Eklund and James Bawley.